Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, and I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at the Kennedy Space Center. If you're feeling like you've had deja vu and we've been here before, well, welcome back for SpaceX's third bite at the apple, trying to launch this particular Falcon 9 rocket on this particular mission. We are T minus 57 minutes, 48 seconds and counting from the currently planned T0 liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. First stage booster 1073 in the SpaceX fleet, hoping once again to send up 22 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit, adding to the more than 6,000 currently in operation. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is behind the technology today, making sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes. Our photographer, Adam Bernstein, also out getting ready to track the rocket, do some still photography as well for this mission. If you're not already following the fellas on social media, you can find our photographers, Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane, over on X, formerly known as Twitter. Adam is at ABurnNYC, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. And while you're there, be sure to give Spaceflight Now a follow, simply at Spaceflight Now. And if you are not on X, you can also find us on Facebook as well as Threads. We'll also be joined in our rocket tracking coverage this evening by our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck Briggs. Give you a live look from Chuck's camera vantage point right now. We'll be checking in with his perspective periodically throughout the countdown this afternoon. Of course, this Falcon 9 rocket at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40, known as Slick 40, getting ready to lift off T minus 55 minutes, 30 seconds in counting. Once this mission goes forward, this will become the 44th dedicated Starlink launch in 2024 and the 107th launch specifically of the V2 mini Starlink design. Well, SpaceX is currently targeting the opening of the window this afternoon, 4:31 p.m. As you well know by now, they do have multiple backup opportunities extending through the window as long as they have not started fueling. The window today lasts until 8:19 p.m. Eastern, 0019 UTC for our friends around the world. And if SpaceX needs to take a mulligan once again, they do have a 24-hour backup opportunity for this mission. That would be coming up on Saturday, June 15th, with a window opening at 4:07 p.m. Eastern, but hopefully the third time will in fact be the charm. That's right, I know, but hopefully true. Certainly appreciate the little more than 1,200 of you that are joining with us live as we are kicking things off. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button. Lots more folks to find their way into the live coverage here as we continue to step through this next hour with all of you wonderful folks. Also want to thank, speaking of wonderful folks, our fabulous moderators here in the live chat, helping to keep things kosher and allow for a wonderful and robust conversation talking about all things space flight and other items of interest on the space domain. So thanks to Astro Jen Callistia Lee. Just scrolling to see who else we may have with us this afternoon. Looks like it is just the two of them right now, but they are two fabulous moderators. So appreciate Astro Jen and Callistia Lee for being with us today. And we'll keep our eyes out for Stephanie B, Astro, Joe, and Rusty Shackelford if they're able to pop in with us a little bit later as the count rolls on. It is still a work day for folks, and so I know it is sometimes difficult, especially before we hit that 5 o'clock quitting time for some folks' jobs. They're able to join us with live coverage, but if you are able to maybe put on some headphones, have us on in the background, and then bring your eyeballs to the screen when it's go time, that works as well. We are, of course, powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like James SG, that Martin guy, that Opal guy, Donald Tremmel, Josh King, Butterfly, Banana Cakes, and many others. David Ortiz, Bruce McNinch. Apologies, Bruce, if I just botched your last name there. Thanks to all of you for joining us today, supporting us with channel membership. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, where you can find things like embroidered mission patches for the crew flight test, which is currently very much in progress. Got a little bit of an update on that, which we'll discuss later on in the broadcast. You can also get the mission patch for the forthcoming Crew 9 flight of 3 astronauts and a cosmonaut. That mission is coming up in the August timeframe, lifting off from pad 39A, also aboard a Falcon 9 rocket, of course. With membership, you can also check out the member-only videos here on YouTube, as well as have access to 4K views of the liftoff moments of all of our launches from here at the Cape. And I want to thank one of our moderators and channel members, Clistia Lee, for getting us started with a good bit of generosity, giving 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Clistia. And to our newest 10 channel members, first off, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Clistia in the live chat if you haven't already. Last but not least, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature if you have a comment or question or just want to show a little bit of support for the channel, all of which are greatly appreciated. But specifically, if you have a comment or question and would like to be a part of the show and that comment or question is appropriate to be read in the show, love to bring you into the broadcast. And not only will you give us some interesting things to talk about, but you're supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that on both fronts is greatly appreciated. So thanks to folks like Tom Johnson, and kicking us off with a super chat, my mother, Mary Robinson, joining us both each with a $20 super chat. Very appreciative of the two of you, both to Tom and Mom. Be sure to say hello to Mama Robinson in the live chat if you haven't already. We are now T-minus 50 minutes, 9 seconds, and counting. Of course, the weather has been the story du jour for today, for yesterday, for the first go-around. Taking a satellite view of the cloud activity that we're seeing, as looks like tropical disturbance number 1, if it is still tropical disturbance number 1, is starting to push off and away from the east coast of the United States. However, still lingering with a pretty persistent line of thunderstorms, mostly keeping to the southern Florida area. So still keeping kind thoughts for our friends and neighbors to the south, that the flooding starts to subside soon, and hopefully there are no injuries, of course, and not too much property damage as well. Of course, we're also keeping an eye on the weather here locally at the pad. We've been flirting with a phase 1 lightning warning. Lightning watch, excuse me. Lightning warning would be phase 2, and that's more of an immediate potential impact. One of the weather criteria that we track is lightning within 10 miles of the pad. That warning has cleared. And currently, we're tracking green or go conditions on a weather front at this particular moment in time. Of course, we're still 48 minutes out from the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, so we will continue to keep a weather eye on that, so to speak, and let you know if there are any updates or changes as the count continues to roll on. But as of this sentence, SpaceX continues to target that 4:31 liftoff time, the beginning of the window today. And of course, we will let you know if that changes, as we always do. Taking a look at the countdown timeline for this mission before we come back to some super chats here, just let you know some of the milestones that we're anticipating as we're stepping on through the count. Of course, SpaceX managing the countdown from its Hangar X site as part of the Roberts Road campus here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. If you were not with us yesterday, I mentioned during that broadcast, and I'll reiterate again because it's still relevant. SpaceX has gotten the environmental green light for an expansion of 100 acres at its Roberts Road campus to allow for a consolidation of its facilities around Brevard County. A site plan has not been approved. That'll be part of the next steps in this process. Once a land use agreement is finalized between SpaceX and KSC, then they could start to move forward with some more specific and actionable items that we'll start to be able to visually see out there. Other big item for SpaceX, though, concerning Pad 39A and the launch of their Starship rocket. Yesterday was the second and final day for in-person public scoping for an environmental impact statement assessment of Starship launch operations at historic Pad 39A. But if you'd like to lend your voice and get some more information about it, two things on that front. Number one, we have an article up right now on spaceflightnow.com, so you can read more about both of those projects that I just mentioned, but specifically concerning the environmental impact statement. There is a virtual meeting that is happening on Monday, June 17th, and we have the information for you to participate in that, also embedded within that article I just mentioned on the website, spaceflightnow.com. So coming into our countdown timeline for this mission, we have on deck Starlink 10-2, about 45 and a half minutes out. Things will start going once SpaceX launch director makes the call on the start of prop load. That event comes up at T-minus 38 minutes. If the go-ahead is given for the start of fueling, then prop load begins with the loading of RP1, or rocket-grade kerosene, on both the first and second stage tanks. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9 first stage. T-minus 16 minutes, second stage lock load begins, but before that, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strongback. Happens as the feed lines are being chilled prior to that second stage lock load. Big vent comes up right about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. It's a good indication that fueling is happening on time as well. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it protects the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. That starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the strong back, or the transporter erector, two names for the same thing. That'll recline away from the rocket about 1.5 degrees away. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes out, the first stage LOX tank is full. 2 minutes before liftoff, second stage LOX load wraps up, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. And in the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin 1D engines are healthy and ignite, Flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release that bird for a T0 liftoff at 4:31 p.m. Eastern, 2031 UTC, or in other words, T minus 43 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. Worth noting as well, of course, that the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center has activated in support of this launch, one of the busiest in the country, since they activate for the fueling of any launch vehicle that's going to be in operation here at the Cape, either on the KSC side or on the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station side, part of the public safety system here on Florida's Space Coast. Obviously, they do much more than just respond to launch operations. This is kicking into their busy season as hurricane season is officially upon us. We are 14 days in now. So far, just a little bit of tropical activity that has had some knock-on impacts to this particular launch as well. Some of the forecasters are teeing us up for what they expect to be a very active hurricane season. So if you haven't already, while we are in a somewhat quiet period for those of us north of the South Florida area, now is always a good time to prepare before a storm is imminent. That, of course, is when people will be making a rush on all the supplies that are needed during such times. Speaking of the weather, coming into the launch attempt today, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast 70% chance of violating constraints for this launch. Put another way, they start the window with just a 30% chance of go conditions that increase to a 70% chance of go conditions by the end of the window. Main two weather criteria that were put on the watch list for today, which hang into tomorrow if needed as a backup opportunity, are both the anvil cloud rule and the cumulus cloud rule. Take a look at the wide shot here from our vantage point at the press site. So we are now just about 40 minutes out from liftoff. You can see some of those clouds hanging out and around the area of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Certainly keeping an eye on that, but at this point, it seems as though, knock on wood, we are still trending well on the weather side. Decision point coming up in now less than 2 minutes for the SpaceX launch director to make a call on the startup prop load. Taking a look back at the live chat here, I want to thank the more than 2,300 of you that are now joining with us. If you haven't already, we wouldn't mind hitting that like button to allow some more folks to find their way in as we continue on through the count. That would be very greatly appreciated. Also want to extend our appreciation to some folks that are using that super chat feature. So thanks to Thomas Snyder for $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Thomas, for your support. And to SG, one of our wonderful channel members. Good to see you again this evening with a $5 super chat. And very excited, Corgi with a hiya message. Also want to thank Cindy Gabner for continuing on with us with channel membership, making that 1 month mark. It's always wonderful to see new channel members join with us, but it is just as encouraging, sometimes even more so, to see folks hit their multiple month markers. But that 1 month is fabulous to see. So thank you for your support, Cindy, and hello to you there in West Melbourne. Weather continuing to remain green here, so encouraging on the weather front. Hopefully, we'll get an update from SpaceX in the next couple of minutes here, letting us know that fueling has in fact begun. We'll also be watching for some of the telltale signs that fueling has gotten underway. Of course, fueling starts at the T minus 35-minute mark. What we are looking for here as we are continuing in through the countdown here, T minus 36 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. As you can certainly see, I'll go back to the wide shot here. Seeing some of those cumulus clouds moving into the area, which we're again keeping a close eye on, as that may be an inhibiting factor for launch or could shuffle things back in the window. Again, at this moment in time, SpaceX has not adjusted their T0, though we are keeping a close eye on that. They will have needed to have made a call by now on the start of fueling, unless they are adjusting their T0. And since we had not heard word and was certainly a possibility, SpaceX has made their first adjustment to their T0. They're now targeting 4:49 p.m. Eastern, 4:49 p.m. Eastern, 2049 UTC. So you can see we've adjusted our countdown clock here, now reverting back to T minus 53 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Hopefully, since they have made just a slight change, not moving too deep into their launch window, reading the tea leaves a little bit, but that could suggest that I feel like the cloud issue, if that was in fact the inhibiting point, will have cleared with this extra little bit of time added. We are now currently T minus 46 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. If you are just joining us, welcome to our live coverage of the Starlink 10-2 mission currently in progress. Will Robinson Smith, reporter for Spaceflight Now. Appreciate you joining with us on this mostly lovely Friday afternoon. We did just have our first little bit of likely a weather-related bump in the launch timeline for the mission, as SpaceX now currently targeting 4:49 liftoff of its Falcon 9 rocket from Pad 40 over here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Taking a look at the rocket from the vantage point of our friend Chuck Briggs. SpaceX once again in front of the decision point that they'll need to make a call on for the start of fueling. It's coming up in just a little less than 8 minutes from now. Mentioned a little bit earlier in the broadcast that there was an update on the crew flight test mission for Boeing's Starliner, currently docked to the International Space Station. The update, as it currently stands, is that the undock and landing has shifted from the previous no earlier than date of June 18th to now looking at no earlier than June 22nd. That would also be just 2 days before the planned spacewalk with NASA astronauts Matt Dominic and Tracy Dyson. A spacewalk that NASA decided to stand down from yesterday morning due to a spacesuit discomfort issue. We reached out to NASA to glean a little bit more information about that, but they declined to further comment, stating personnel privacy considerations. So at this juncture, it is not entirely publicly clear if the discomfort issue was concerning Tracy or Matt or both, and what exactly the issue was. Coming back to the CFT mission, though, this gives a good bit more time for NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, the commander and pilot of the CFT mission, respectively. A little more time for them on station to not only go through some additional checkouts of the spacecraft from their perspective, but also for NASA and Boeing mission managers to check out some items where crew are involved, as well as on the spacecraft itself. They're going to be conducting a hot fire test of 7 of the 8 aft facing, or the bottom of the spacecraft, thrusters. While the spacecraft is docked to the station, they're going to do 2 1-second burns. Those who were tracking the ascent and docking of the rendezvous and docking, I should say, of the Starliner spacecraft. You may recall that there were some issues that cropped up with the thrusters, the reaction control system thrusters on the Starliner service module, which sits beneath the crew module where the astronauts are located. And that was a separate issue, according to Commercial Crew Program Manager Steve Stitch. A separate issue from the helium leaks, one of which was identified and characterized before liftoff, 4 of which have since cropped up between mission launch and since the spacecraft has been docked to the International Space Station. They're taking a little bit of extra time with all of those items as they work towards bringing Butch and Sonny back home. One of the other items they're looking at that they mentioned a couple of days ago, there was an RCS oxidizer isolation valve in the service module that is not properly closed. So a couple things they're looking at where the spacecraft is involved. They're also going to be repeating a couple of items that the crew has done previously. One of those is the safe haven protocol. Essentially, if there were a scenario in which the space station was, for whatever reason, not safe for the crew members, the safe haven protocol would see them go back into the spacecraft that brought them to the ISS and essentially basically hunker down, sort of like in a think of like a life raft in space sort of scenario. They're also going to be doing some additional hatch operations, something that, since they have the benefit of having crew on this mission, they want to learn as much as possible about the spacecraft. And so going through some of these operations again will give them some more data, which is important as they are working to fully validate the spacecraft and certify it ahead of the first crew rotation mission, Starliner 1, which is coming up no earlier than springtime of next year, 2025, assuming that all the work that needs to be done between now and then can be accomplished by around the fall time. We're now once again at T minus 39 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. Coming up on that decision point for the SpaceX launch team here for the start of fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket for the Starlink 10-2 mission. They'll need to make that call just about a minute from now. Taking a look at the live chat while we were waiting for that decision to be made. Want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, Cole Cunningham, for gifting two $10 super chats. Really appreciate that, Cole. Good to see you this evening. Now we'll let the folks who are live with us in the live chat muse about the second part of his message. We're we don't have enough information to speculate on the point of discomfort for the spacesuit ahead of EVA 90. So we're just going to go ahead and once again, we do have another time shuffle with SpaceX here. Now looking at a 5:07 p.m. Eastern new T0 for the Falcon 9 rocket. With our countdown clock adjusted again. Thank you, Stephen. We are now sitting back again at T minus 54 minutes, 29 seconds and counting. Tricky navigating through weather this mercurial, especially when it comes to cloud cover and it not being just a solid wall of clouds, but the cumulus clouds, which you can see here on the wide view of the pad, creating some unfortunate conditions. Currently T minus 45 minutes, 18 seconds and counting to the current T0 time for this mission. That is that is 5:07. We are starting to see some better conditions. It's been sort of a back and forth kind of an afternoon here on Florida's Space Coast. Taking a super wide look from the press site here. You can see those cumulus clouds that we've been mentioning throughout the broadcast with a little bit better context. Movement is appearing to be from the east to the west, so coming in the direction of the Atlantic towards our position here at the press site. Of course, we will continue to keep an eye on weather conditions as we step on through the count. SpaceX, once again, about 6-ish minutes away from needing to make a call on the start of propellant load for today's mission. The window does extend out to 8:19 p.m. Eastern, so they have a fair bit more latitude to move around if they, in fact, do need that time. Hopefully, they will not need it, but we will continue to keep you abreast of any changes in the liftoff time as we'll track this mission. This, of course, not the only bit of activity when it comes to rockets today. Closing out our Friday, our neighbor to the west of us, Alabama, get a bit of an activity on the north end of the state. If you're familiar with the Rocket City, which is Huntsville, think of that on a map, sort of near I-65, a little bit south of Tennessee. Now, truck across the Tennessee River and the bridge there to a city called Decatur, Alabama, and just a little bit outside the main zone of the main city limits of Decatur is where ULA has their rocket factory. Sits on the Tennessee River, which of course is important so that it can barge rocket pieces from its factory down here to the Cape for launches here. Or out to California once it's ready to start flying Vulcan rockets again from the West Coast, or I shouldn't say again, flying Vulcan rockets for the first time from the West Coast. Look forward to that event. Speaking of Vulcan rockets, though, that was the bit of news today. ULA President and CEO Tory Bruno was teasing this throughout the morning that they were getting ready to make a shipment down here to the Cape. This is the Vulcan booster that you're looking here on a quick 7-second loop video that was published by ULA's President and CEO Tory Bruno, leaving the factory there at Decatur and getting loaded up on their transport barge, which is called Rocket Ship. In a social media post, and Tory was very generous with his time throughout the day and answering a lot of folks' questions on X, formerly known as Twitter, about this operation that you're seeing here. This is the booster that'll be used on the Vulcan CERT-2 mission, as the same pattern on the livery that we saw with Vulcan CERT-1, that flame pattern. Won't be the case for all of the Vulcan boosters that ULA will launch, but this is the design for CERT-1 and CERT-2. Of course, CERT-1 launched Astrobotics Peregrine lunar lander earlier this year. This particular booster is going to be launching Sierra Space's Dream Chaser space plane with a launch time frame looking to lift off from Space Launch Complex 41 around the month of September is the current target plan for that. Continuing on, here's a look inside. Of course, in the middle is that Vulcan first stage booster that we just saw. To the left, though, that is the Centaur upper stage. So they pack the rocket ship up and it'll be heading down to Florida. Tori mentioned that it'll take about 8 days on average. Obviously, that assuming that all the weather and traffic on the river and once they get onto the Gulf of Mexico, all that continues to run smoothly, but it takes nominally about 8 days to leave the factory here as it did today and then make its way down to the Cape. At the same time, though, things are continuing to stay quite busy there in ULA's rocket factory in Decatur. This is a look at the Vulcan rocket for the first national security mission launch. That is USSF 106. ULA needs to launch 2 certification flights successfully before it can move on to this next mission. And as you can see here from this photo, again published by Tori on his X account, they have already begun installation of one of the BE4 engines. That's what you're seeing there near the top of the booster from the ground up that you're seeing from this vantage point. One of the BE4 is getting installed there on this particular Vulcan booster. They'll ultimately be powered by 2 BE4 engines provided by Blue Origin. So certainly a busy day for ULA. Lots to talk about with their Vulcan rocket. Of course, the rocket moment that we are waiting and watching for at the moment here, currently at the Cape, is this Falcon 9 rocket, hoping to lift off in now just about a little under 38 minutes from now, assuming SpaceX has gone ahead and made the call for the start of prop load. We're now currently at T minus 36 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. And we do have an update from SpaceX. They say, and I quote, all systems are looking good. The propellant load is about to begin for today's launch of 22 Starlink satellites from Florida. And while they don't explicitly mention the weather, we can infer from the fact that they are in a position to start prop load that they believe weather is good enough to move forward with a launch opportunity. Of course, SpaceX, once they do begin fueling the Falcon 9 rocket, they no longer have the option to push back the T0 liftoff time. And so that is an encouraging vote of confidence that 5:07 p.m. will be our sticking point here today. So fueling now set to begin less than a minute from now once we hit the T minus 35 minute mark. So they want to thank the more than 4,800 of you, nearly 4,900 who are watching with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button to allow more folks to find their way into our live coverage as we continue to roll merrily along. Also want to thank two of our channel members, Artemis, back with us again today with a very generous 50 Spaceflight Now Super memberships. Really appreciate that level of generosity, Artemis, growing our community here. Also, big thanks to Cappy Cross for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that from the both of you. And to our newest now 55 channel members, which is super awesome. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to thank Cappy Cross and Artemis in the live chat and welcome aboard. Hope you stick around. Right now at T minus 30 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. Coming up in just under a minute, SpaceX teams will start loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. That helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same process will happen on the Falcon 9's second stage at about the T minus 25 minute mark. For those who were not with us, we had our live launch coverage yesterday in anticipation of this mission going ahead. The Falcon 9 first stage booster supporting this flight and the launch of 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites. It's tail number B1073 in the SpaceX fleet. It's going for its 16th flight today. Let's go ahead and give you a lowdown on the missions it has previously flown on its way to flight number 16. Came into service back on May 14th of 2022 with a batch of 53 version 1.5 Starlink satellites. It was Starlink mission 4-15. Next up was the launch of a satellite for Luxembourg-based company SES, the C-band communications satellite called SES-22. It was followed by a pair of Starlink missions on August 10th, Starlink 4-26, and September 24th, Starlink 4-35. That was followed by a mission to the moon that unfortunately ended with the spacecraft crash landing being unsuccessful. That was iSpace's Hakuto R mission number 1, company based in Japan, currently working on its second Hakuto R mission to the moon. I believe set to launch in 2025, if I'm not mistaken. Next up for this was the launch of Spanish communications company Hispasat and their Amazonas Nexus satellite. Helps bring coverage to the Americas, Europe, and North Africa. That was followed up by mission to the International Space Station, a cargo Dragon flight, CRS-27, or Commercial Resupply Services number 27. That launched on March 15th of last year. There were a string of Starlink satellite missions after that. We had Starlink 6-2 on April 19th, 5-11 on June 12th, 6-12 on September 4th, 6-27 on November 8th. Coming into this year, 6-37 on January 15th, 6-41 on March 4th. That was followed up by a rideshare mission for this booster, Bandwagon 1, which launched from Pad 39A, landed back at Landing Zone 1, or LZ1, on April 7th of this year. And then most recently, we're back to the Starlink flights, Starlink Group 6-58, which launched and landed on May 13th of this year. Now, T-minus 27 minutes, 15 seconds, and counting from the launch of this particular booster. Start to see some frost forming at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. Happens as the super cold liquid oxygen is loaded on board the vehicle. And as the fuel line continues to creep up, obviously the summer Florida air is much warmer than the LOX that's being loaded on. Creates a little bit of frost on the exterior of the Falcon 9. Shifting to a little trajectory talk, let's mention where this Falcon 9 is going to be going once it leaves the pad. Always an item of question that we get here on the channel. Lifting off from pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Space Launch Complex 40, or SLIC 40. Falcon 9 is going to be flying in a northeasterly trajectory, scooting up along the east coast of the United States. This will be a daytime launch, so maybe not as easily spotted for our friends to the north, but keep a close eye out for folks in the Jacksonville, Georgia, Carolinas area. You may be able to spot it as it begins its uphill climb. Falcon 9 first stage booster is going to be landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions a little more than 8 minutes after liftoff. This will mark the 250th booster landing on a drone ship, if successful, today. little bit further downrange, the payload fairings will also be recovered by one of SpaceX's vessels. It's got two of them named Bob and Doug after Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the duo who flew the Demo 2 mission, SpaceX's first crewed flight to the International Space Station back in May of 2020. SpaceX is currently preparing for two more crewed missions in the next few months. Of course, you've got the launch of the Polaris Dawn private astronaut mission, led by the astronaut who commanded the first private astronaut mission for SpaceX Inspiration 4 back in September of 2021, leading another quartet of astronauts into low Earth orbit. Got a lot of demonstrations that they're going to be executing in that mission, including perhaps the flashiest of them all and important for future commercial endeavors. They're going to be doing a spacewalk from the Dragon spacecraft using some spacesuits that were specifically developed by SpaceX. They'll also be doing an on-orbit tech demonstration of the Starlink internet service while on orbit, as well as a lot of experiments and taking some readings and observations concerning human health along the way, both before the launch, during the mission, and after. So a lot of learning expected to come from the Polaris Dawn mission. That'll be followed up in the August timeframe by the aforementioned Crew 9 mission. That'll be the ninth full crew rotation mission to the International Space Station, the 10th time that SpaceX will have taken NASA astronauts to and from the ISS, including, of course, Demo 2. It's also taken 3 sets of astronauts up on private astronaut missions through Axiom Space. Currently T-minus 22 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. Just a little more than 2 minutes away from the so-called big vent here. Let's begin to chill the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We're now T minus 20 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. The so-called big vent coming right on time, a good indication that fueling is moving along on schedule here. We're now T minus 16 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. The so-called big vent has now wrapped up, and we are just about 20 seconds away from the start of second stage liquid oxygen load on the Falcon 9 rocket. So far, fueling continues to move along steadily and on time. Good indication that hopefully we will have the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket to kick off our weekend. Looking ahead a little further down the road, SpaceX will have this pad back in action coming up no earlier than Tuesday, the mission launch for Luxembourg-based company SES. On tap will be the Astra 1P satellite. It will be providing television service to markets in Germany, Spain, and France, sent up to the 19.2 degrees east orbital position. And that mission coming up on Tuesday, the 18th. Also on Tuesday, for our friends in California, looks like there will be a launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base. That is Starlink 9-1 coming up also on Tuesday. We're now T minus 13 minutes, 58 seconds and counting. Certainly want to thank the more than 9,000 of you who are with us already. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. Allow us more folks to find their way into our live coverage as we continue on in through the count. Also want to thank Psychonaut69 for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that. Welcome to our newest channel member, courtesy of Psychonaut. Be sure to thank them in the live chat if you haven't already. Also, thanks to Artemis, back again with some generosity, another $10 super chat. And go big or go home. And hopefully we will see a launch tonight before we go on out the digital door for this weekend. Channel member Tanner Lee has been a member for 1 month. Glad to have you with us still, Tanner. Happy 1 month with us here in the Spaceflight Now member community. Speaking of the member community, Charles Boyer joining us with the $5 super chat. Good to see you this evening, Charles, saying, let's launch this thing and get everyone home in time for dinner. Well, if I had the power to wave my wand and make it happen, I certainly would. I will do it in spirit. Hopefully that's good enough. Well, speaking of good enough, Falcon 9 rocket has been good enough for SpaceX to have launched it now 345 times. This will be launch number 346 for SpaceX and its Falcon 9 fleet to date. Falcon 9 stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Most of that made up by the first stage of the rocket. Of course, this particular first stage booster, tail number 1073, is launching for its 16th time today. At the base of the rocket are those 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene, RP1, and liquid oxygen and produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment, you can see those black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, SpaceX will be using Just Read the Instructions tonight. Above that first stage is the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right, you see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. In the first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches. Automatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVAC engine, and is equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 22 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. The MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 and LOX, same as the first stage. It will ignite a third time after Starlink satellite deployment to begin a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the rocket are the payload fairing halves, which encapsulate the 22 Starlink satellites. Fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Two halves of the payload fairings will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. They splash down gently under parachutes, and again will be recovered by SpaceX, part of their refurbishment process, as they are working to certify first stage boosters and the payload fairings for up to 40 flights apiece. Here's an image of what that recovery process looks like. Fairing half floating down to the ocean water beneath under the support of the parachute I was just mentioning. This is what the recovery process looks like as the fairing halves are brought aboard the recovery vessel as well. Now, T minus 8 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. Just about a minute and a half away from the point at which the engine chill down sequence begins. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, protecting them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. Taking a look at the live chat, I want to thank the now more than 13,000 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, allow some folks to find their way into our coverage, as we are now less than 7 minutes away from the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. And just taking a look at some of the comments in the live chat, Butterfly, I know I've not run out of things to say. There's always things to say, but like to reserve our commentary for, I'll say, mostly relevant things that are germane to the mission at hand or other things going on with space exploration and the mission, or some interesting comments in the live chat. So, no, your audio is not faulty, still very much here. Also understand the value of phrased as audio negative space. I want to call it that. Virtue of silence sometimes. That not every moment of launch commentary opportunity needs to be filled by launch commentary. That said, and I'm not sure what the context was, but I'll give a shout out to that Opal guy for making an airplane reference, which is, in my opinion, a classic spoof movie. Wonderful bit of satire starring the wonderful Leslie Nielsen. Highly recommended if you haven't already seen it. Maybe add that to your weekend viewing. We're now less than 5 minutes away from the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. Should be getting some mission audio from SpaceX in the next few seconds here.
Tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
And as it has been spoken into the universe, we are now getting that mission audio and some pad views from SpaceX as well. As you heard that call out, they're getting ready for the strong back retract sequence to begin. Just as a little bit of housekeeping here, you see our countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. A little bit different from what you see from SpaceX there at the bottom of that frame.
Strong back retract has started.
Our clock is in real time and the SpaceX feed coming in on a few seconds delay. Strong back retract, as you heard, now in motion. Starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, as you see here in this live picture from SpaceX. The transporter erector will recline at about 1.5 degrees away from the rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to get out of the way of this bird as it takes flight. Now T-minus 3 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. About 30 seconds from now, the Falcon 9 first stage tank should be full. Coming up now, less than 20 seconds. Complete. Good call from SpaceX. Now just about 10 seconds away from that first stage LOX tank filling completion.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
And you heard that good call from SpaceX. The last fueling milestone coming up at about the 2-minute mark. Second stage LOX load. Want to welcome our newest channel member, Steve Reynolds, joining us at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Steve. Glad to have you with us. As a reminder, channel members have access to 4K views of the moment of liftoff for all the missions from here at the Cape, so hope you enjoy that. Coming up now, less than 2 minutes away.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
And with that, the Falcon 9 is now fully fueled. Seeing the ground gas closeouts here on your screen. And as we near about 20,000 folks joining with us live.
Gas launch closeout.
Ask if you could hit that like button, allow some more folks to find their way into our live coverage as we're now just about a minute to lift off. Be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight now if you haven't already. We are getting pretty close to 250,000 subscribers. Sitting about 240 right now. We'd love to have you join in the fun.
Falcon 9 is the startup.
And with that, we are just now waiting on the launch director to give their go for launch call. Expecting that in the next few seconds.
The go for launch.
And with that, we are now just about 30 seconds away from the liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. Preparing to send up 22 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. Now 20 seconds out. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. Abort. We've had an abort in this mission. Unclear, as it appears right at the moment of engine ignition. They called an abort. It's been some time since we've had a mid-ignition abort of a Falcon 9 rocket. We will stand by to see if we have additional information from SpaceX in the next minute or so here.
And prop uploads are starting.
And you hear that call out there beginning to offload some of the propellant from the Falcon 9 rocket and save the vehicle. SpaceX has ended their broadcast, and therefore the mission audio channel from them has also gone quiet. We're not going to wrap up our broadcast just yet, though. We're standing by for more information from SpaceX. Again, if you're just joining us, had a rare instance of an abort of the Falcon 9 rocket at the moment of engine ignition. Something that hasn't happened for, again, quite some time, and we're working to learn more information about what may have happened. Again, for those who may just be popping in here, as the countdown was reaching the moment of T0 liftoff, we saw the engine ignition command was issued, and the Merlins did ignite. However, obviously the hold down clamps did not release the Falcon 9 rocket, still very much at the pad, as there was a last second abort. Not immediately clear what the computer system that controls the last moments of Falcon 9 launch may have caught that would have caused it to abort the mission. But again, we are standing by as we're working to learn more from SpaceX on why they had to stand down from this launch attempt today. Again, if you are just joining us here now live, as you can see from our countdown clock and the obvious presence of the Falcon 9 rocket still at the pad, SpaceX aborted the launch of the Starlink 10-2 mission at the moment of T0. A rare occurrence here. Want to go back and show you the moments leading up to that abort. As you see here, the engines did ignite, but something cropped up. Of course, this is an automated sequence once it gets down to that point of engine ignition. So the onboard flight computers determined something was not in line and ultimately caused an abort at the moment of T0 liftoff is when the call was made, or in the moments right up to that, maybe milliseconds. Hard to tell just from a visual standpoint. So far, SpaceX has not issued a statement on the scrub, either leading to an explanation as to why this abort call was made, or simply saying that the mission has been aborted. Depending on the root cause of this Falcon 9 launch standing down from lifting off, sending those 22 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit, that'll determine, of course, when SpaceX will be ready to make another launch attempt. As far as their scheduling on the range, they did have a 24-hour backup opportunity available tomorrow, Saturday, June 15th, with a window that opens at 4:07 p.m. Eastern. However, we'll stress again that we do not know that they will be in a position to take advantage of that launch opportunity tomorrow. That is just the next immediately available launch opportunity to them. If in fact they are in a position to launch tomorrow, the 45th Weather Squadron forecasts the launch weather starts at 40% favorable and improves to 80% favorable by the end of the window. And again, that is assuming that SpaceX is in a position to launch tomorrow. Still standing by, waiting for more information from them on the reason for the scrub and confirmation that the abort happened. As we continue to wait and track any updates from them, do want to thank a few folks for joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. A welcome to Bob B and to Deborah Bledsoe, both joining our channel member community. Welcome aboard, and we're glad to have you with us. those still with us, we're continuing to work to get some information from SpaceX about the launch abort here. As they were coming into the just final seconds, really hitting that T0 liftoff point of the Falcon 9 rocket. Taking a look back at a replay from our friend Chuck Briggs' camera perspective. Final seconds leading to that T0 abort. This was the third launch attempt for SpaceX to send up this particular mission, Starlink 10-2. Obviously, it was just a brief point of ignition before the onboard flight computers cut off the firing of the Merlin engines. Unclear if all 9 of those Merlins fired, what the issue may have been that led to the scrub. There was, of course, their third time trying to launch this vehicle. Yesterday, they stood down because of poor weather. SpaceX never did mention what caused them to stand down from their first launch attempt. That was back on a Wednesday. Unclear what the issue may be here, if it's something on a technical front that SpaceX needs to work through. More than likely, though, this scrub of the mission will cause SpaceX to have to push off the launch for SES from Wednesday or from Tuesday, possibly into Wednesday or a little bit further. We don't have firm information on that just yet, as this mission was just aborted. However, that satellite for SES will be using this same pad that you see here on your screen, Space Launch Complex 40 here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, for the launch of that mission. And actually, we do have word now from SpaceX, a short statement. They say, and I quote, "Standing down from today's Falcon 9 launch, a new target launch date will be shared once available." So a very brief statement, which I will read once again. "Standing down from today's Falcon 9 launch, a new target launch date will be shared once available." So no insight into the reason behind the scrub. SpaceX likely won't share that information publicly before we get into the next launch attempt. From a technical perspective, the onboard flight computers, as we mentioned during the discussion of the countdown sequence for Falcon 9 rocket, they take control and the system becomes automated at about the 1 minute mark. At that point, the onboard flight computers are assessing the health of the vehicle. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds. And from that point to the moment of ignition at T0, of course, the computer is looking very closely at all aspects of the health of those 9 Merlin 1D engines and making sure the system on board the Falcon 9 rocket is operating as intended. So something in that last minute of technical assessment seems to have been the cause of the issue, although we don't know the root cause, and SpaceX again may not include any more information beyond that brief statement, just noting the decision to stand down from today's launch. We'll work to see if we can learn any additional information, of course, from SpaceX. The video you're seeing here on the left-hand side of your screen is a loop of the final seconds before engine ignition. And you see it was just a very brief point of ignition before the engines were shut down. Unclear if all 9 of them did in fact ignite, but clearly something was amiss that the computer caught in that final moment before Falcon 9 was released from its hold down clamps. We're just going back through and reviewing our flight logs of recent moments of pad aborts where there was a last second engine ignition and then a shutdown of the rocket. Possibly the most recent one happened just before the launch of a GPS satellite back on October 3rd of 2020. There was also a last moment abort back on March 15th of 2020 from pad 39A. So likely been at least a few years since we've had an event such as this with a Falcon 9 rocket, workhorse vehicle for SpaceX. This was set to be the 346th Falcon 9 rocket to launch, and likely still will be once SpaceX is in a position to launch this vehicle. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wind down our live coverage. Do want to acknowledge Adam for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Adam, for your support at that level. And Adam says, thank you for bringing us all on a journey of wonder and discovery. Thank you so much for the kind words and for support in our mission here at Spaceflight Now. And of course, we will continue to monitor for any further updates on this mission. Be sure to check our website, spaceflightnow.com, for updates to the launch schedule for this flight and for the others, which will likely have some knock-on effect potentially, certainly with the next mission launching from this particular pad, more than likely. the next two flights that we're tracking from SpaceX coming up next week on Tuesday, the 18th. Starlink 9-1 from Vandenberg Space Force Base, California, and the launch of the SES satellite from Pad 40. Again, those two missions were scheduled to launch on the 18th. We will stand by for further information, see when those may be rescheduled if the schedule needs to shuffle on those to this launch scrub. With that, want to thank the just before we thank our team here, want to note the fuel line starting to decrease there on the Falcon 9 rocket, of course, as they are draining the propellant from the vehicle and safing it. And we will continue to track the progress of this mission and let you know as we learn more. But want to thank our friends Pete Carsons with Max Key Productions and Chuck Briggs for once again being ready behind the cameras to support tracking coverage of this Falcon 9 rocket. To our launch photography team of Adam Bernstein out here at the press site and Michael Kane. Appreciate the both of you. Again, you can follow them on X, formerly known as Twitter. Adam at Aburn NYC, Michael at MD Kane Jr. Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. Thanks as well to our wonderful moderators here, have been working hard, keeping things kosher in the live chat. So thanks to Callistia Lee and Astro Jen. I believe Astro Joe popped in at one point as well. So thanks to all of you for helping us out today. To our editor, Stephen Young. We're running the technical operations of the broadcast, and mostly thanks to you for wherever you're watching from this Friday afternoon. Unfortunately, we roll on into the weekend without a Falcon 9 launch, but that just means one more to look forward to coming up at some point in the future. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. Bye-bye.